what was that transition like coming to New York? Like, why'd you decide to leave school, pack up your bags?
I felt like I was at a point where it was either you're going to have like a very stable life and like get serious about school and like do that and then get a job and like take that route, or you're going to have that moment of like, fuck it, I think I can do something bigger. Like, I'm just going to jump.
Welcome back to the Ground Up Show. My name is Matt Diavella, and that was Tyler Babin. Tyler is a photo and video creator for Gary Vaynerchuk. He's traveled with him all around the world, documenting his life as well as developing content for his personal brand. On the podcast today, I had just a blast talking with Tyler. We discuss content strategy, how to simplify your content creation process by focusing on pillars, how he turned an Uber ride into his dream job. We also discuss life and death experiences as well as magic tricks. So we do discuss a wide range of topics today, but most importantly, and my favorite part of the conversation is when we just delve into the craft and really talk about the different things it takes to produce content at a high level as well as to engage a very large audience. Are you enjoying the Ground Up Show? Do you want to support it? There are a couple ways that you can help. Leave a review on iTunes. It only takes 15 seconds and it helps out a lot. Share your favorite podcast with a friend, or go to groundupshow.com to check out more content and be a part of the Ground Up family. All right. That's it. Let's get to this week's podcast with Babin. Enjoy the show. You're listening to The Ground Up Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content and pursue their passions. My name's Matt Diavella, and I'm a filmmaker best known for the Netflix documentary Minimalism. And I'm sitting down with creators to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how to make an impact.
That was one thing, like, I'll give you props for that. When I started like doing my research about the podcast, I was like, fuck, it looks really good.
Oh, thanks, man.
Like visually looks good. Like a lot of people like kind of take a shit on the visuals of podcasts just because like the audio's the hero.
Yeah.
But like looks really good.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Well, that was the thing when I started this last year, 2017. I was like, I need to bring something a little bit different to the table. Yeah.
Especially when everyone and their mom is starting a podcast
right
now.
Dude, it's all over the place. Everybody has a podcast. So I was like, all right, how can I do this in my way? And it's funny because when I first thought of the idea of doing it, it's just I was a fan of podcasting, but then it was also like, all right, how can I do something a little bit differently from filmmaking? I want to kind of take almost a break from filmmaking to try something new. And while this is different, I just completely brought it in. Now I got 3 cameras and the light set up and everything every time. But I think it does help. And the one thing that I knew is that quality, there is a level of quality I think that's noticeable from the viewer. And like everybody talks about like, yeah, you can shoot with your iPhone, the quality's so great, but there's still like a next level of quality that somebody can watch and be like, oh, that person's actually been doing this for a while.
100%.
Do you watch a lot of podcasts or listen to a lot of podcasts?
Not as much as I used to. I still try and consume podcasts as much as I can, but I'm also just like busier than I've ever been. So like I never have time.
It's the balance of, dude, I feel like if I'm listening to podcasts, it's just going to be like an entire week where I'm not making anything and I'm just listening to shit.
Yeah.
And then
I definitely have a stacked like back burner of like the things I need to hit. And there's people who like I follow closely. If they do one, I'm like, all right, I have to make sure I slot that in somewhere.
Yeah. I think it's about kind of including it in your routine, whether it's you go for a jog or you go to the gym. But at the same time, it's very difficult to keep consuming and keep listening to content while you're simultaneously just creating so much.
Yeah.
Where do you see, well, first of all, before we go any further,
we'll take a step back and lay the foundation.
Let people know who the hell you are.
Right.
I do an intro before every episode where I'll kind of break down your credentials and give you a little bit of an intro, but why don't you just give yourself an intro here, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah. So I'm 24. I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, which is the capital, but don't get too excited. I always tell people I grew up in Florida and they're like, nice, South Beach. Like that was awesome. And I was like, no, it's like the swamp. Right. So I grew up there my whole life. I was always really attracted to cameras and creating. I'm a 93 baby. So like digital was like pretty much all I remember. And so the ability to like take a shot and see it on the back of the camera was always really attractive to me, just like the instant gratification. So my whole life was taking pictures and videos around the house. when I got into high school, I went to my school had like a very advanced video program. It wasn't like a special school or anything. It was just for some reason we had like a new show that we played every Friday. So that's how I learned how to edit. And that was just what I was into. And so I always didn't think I was going to go to school or anything. I was like, all right, I see where the world's going. I think I can just leave and figure it out. And then my parents were like, no, you're going to school. So ended up messing around in a community college for a little bit. 2 years ago, dropped out, moved to New York, and ended up working as one of the lead video people for Gary Vee.
And that's where you're at right now.
Yeah.
So to get back to the conversation that we were just jumped right into, I am very interested in podcasting, where it's going, especially like the film side of things.
Yeah.
And with Gary Vee, you guys film all the podcasts that you do, the Ask Gary Vee. And, you know, we see it with Joe Rogan. You see it with now Rich Roll, who's on the podcast. He's starting to do the video. Is that where it's going? Do you think, like, say, fast forward 5 years, if you don't have video along with your podcast, you're missing out completely?
I don't think you're missing out completely. I think video is a great add-on for people who want to consume that visual. But I think the great thing about podcasting is kind of what we were saying, is that it can be like the second thing going on in the background. You know, it's all about like saving time and multitasking. So, you know, you can be doing the dishes and be listening to a podcast at the same time. So I think audio is definitely always going to be the future. But yeah, I think adding that visual component to people who want to like see, because there's so much that gets lost in video, right? Like, I'm talking with my hands, you don't see that. And so I think video is a great way to emphasize things. Right.
The main benefit that I've seen is that I can create teasers and excerpts and additional content from it, where I think that the one thing that's challenging about audio podcasts is that you put it out there, but then how do you actually get people interested in it? Say you have you have Tony Robbins on your podcast, and you're like, all right, like, it would be great if I had a piece of content that I could share with Tony that he could share with his audience. And with audio, it's challenging. Like, you could do the motion graphics, you can do the text overlay and stuff, but it's kind of limiting. And even that is not easy to do. Like, the motion graphics to me would take way longer or cost way more than just doing straight video.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of goes right along with Gary's thesis of like, we do micro content is honestly probably more important than the hero piece in a lot of ways. You know, having those things you can distribute out to people and get attention to the podcast is the ultimate hack.
Right. So if you can kind of use that video to your advantage, that's where it's going to come into play.
And it's also an incredible way to leverage your own following and growth, right? If you're making custom pieces of content for those people, and for the most part, like, if you're interviewing people on a podcast, like, they have an audience that you're interested in like siphoning out of. So giving them something in exchange for, you know, a tag on the Instagram post is beneficial for them because they get value in content, but also it's going to get more attention on what you're doing.
Yeah. And I've been on podcasts before where they'll say, hey, can you share this, you know, on your Instagram, or can you share this on Twitter or whatever? And whenever I do it, and to their credit, they've done this as well, but never put pressure on somebody, because it's their audience. They do whatever 100%. They want. So I always put in parentheses, and I'll send you an email after this. I'll be like, hey, here's the content teasers if you want. Absolutely no pressure to share it, because like I truly, literally, you coming on the podcast is you doing something amazing. You know what I mean? Like
1,000%. Like expecting anything from people is like loser mentality. You know what I mean? Like, you have to like provide all the value up front and be okay. Like, going into it, be okay with like, you might not get the thing you want out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people, especially when they're starting out, they always kind of expect something or are trying to get something, and it's subtle in the way that somebody maybe might send an email, and it's like, you know, really appreciate what you do, this, that, and then all of a sudden at the end is the ask, and like they're trying to get something out of you, or they want something, they want you to share something or check out their channel. And it's like, I think we have to get into a habit of actually just trying to spread, whether it's positivity, saying like, hey, really love your channel, you know, appreciate your content, and then period. That's it. Like, don't try to get something out of every single interaction.
For sure. I don't necessarily think the ask is the bad thing. Like, if you're providing enough value up front, like Gary's whole thing is like give, and then ask. And so I think that it's okay to make those asks, but don't go in, like, don't expect to like give something and have the expectation of definitely getting something in return.
Right. Yeah. Because at some point you do need to actually make these asks and these requests.
Right.
And it's tough. I think it's a balancing art too. Actually, I did just recently see a nice piece of advice where they were saying if you're reaching out to an old friend and you're asking them for something, don't hide the fact that you're asking for something.
Yeah.
Like switch it. And then the very first thing you'll say is like, hey, hey, Brian, do you mind if you like my Facebook page real quick? Would really appreciate it. By the way, I hope you're doing well. As opposed to saying, hey, hope you're doing well. I haven't seen you in a while. Can you like my Facebook page? Yeah. Like that switch where you're just being honest with people and letting them know up front, whether it's an ask or whether, you have to have your intentions be pretty obvious from the front, I think.
And it's just authenticity, right? Like people are smart. They're going to see through that.
Yeah.
Anytime I get a DM from someone who I haven't talked to in 2 years and it just says like, hey, hope you're doing well. I'm like, all right, I know something's about to come in,
Right. So let's go back and talk a little bit about your story and, that Florida come up. What was the first camera you got your hands on?
So my first sort of real video camera was a Sony Handycam. That's the first one that I referenced.
That was my first camera too.
That was like, just actually going a step back, it was a Canon Mini DV cam. Was I got when I was 10. And so I referenced the Handycam as like the first one that had like a hard drive and I could just straight plug in because before it was like you had to record the footage onto the computer to like start editing. Mm-hmm. So the Handycam was where the focus really was, and it all started in video. So it did the job I needed it to do. And then it could also shoot like 8 megapixel stills on the Handycam. And so I started shooting stills a lot with it. And then when I was finishing up high school, I was like, oh, there's a transition where I actually think photography might be more interesting.
What was it that drew you away from video at that point? Why was photography more?
I don't want to say drew me away from video. It was like an addition. It was just being able to, one, it was faster, like just the ability to like capture a moment and be like, cool, we have that, like we can move on. That was interesting. But also when you're like learning and it's lower budget, you can get more like professional results, I want to say, through still photography than you can video, if that makes sense, especially with like being like a Photoshop kid who like understood how to like manipulate things.
I say the same thing for the difference between doing doc style work and narrative type work, where that's why most of my focus in my career early on as a freelancer was just doing the more doc style. And like, even if a tech client would come to me, I'd be like, oh, we primarily try to make it feel authentic and in the moment and capturing you guys while you're working. Because holy shit, would that be more challenging to bring a dolly in and bring the light set up and hire actors and do all this extra stuff. There's an easy way and a hard way to do it. And when you're first getting started, it's probably best to not try to, because when you're starting out, you're not going to get a $50,000, $100,000 budget for a video. So you have to work with what you got. And I think that's probably the best way to do it.
100%.
So what were some of those early video projects that you were doing with the Handycam? Like what kind of stuff were you shooting? Like skateboard videos or?
So it's funny you say that. It was like, I loved skateboarding and like BMXing and stuff. And like all my friends in the neighborhood, we would like go and build up little ramps and stuff. So I was always doing that, but it actually came up through Card Magic, which is kind of a weird one.
Wait, you make Card Magic videos?
Yeah. They still exist out there on the web. I'll show you some.
Yeah.
It was, so when I first moved, I moved from Gainesville to Tallahassee. I had no friends. It was a fresh move, and I was going straight into 6th grade. So it was like a school transition too. So it was a big one. And I got paired up as a locker buddy with this kid named Philip, who like, I feel like I, in some weird way, owe all my success to. I really want to like try and find him.
Yeah.
And he was from Korea. He had just moved to America, like knew no English, but could do magic tricks. And so that was like our way of communication. And I wanted to learn how to do them, but like he couldn't speak English, and so he couldn't tell me. So I found a magic store in Tallahassee, got my mom to take me there one morning and spent like 6 hours there and got obsessed with card tricks and like befriended like the magician there. And so I got really into card magic, and that was like my whole, like from 6th grade to like graduating high school, I was known as like the magic kid above like the photography kid,
which is so cool.
Super funny.
Just blowing people's minds.
Yeah.
So you're drawn into magic, and you just, what are you doing? Like card tricks?
Yeah. Just like random card tricks. And it was just like my way of doing something to like fill my time. But I was an only child, and so I was like alone a lot during the day. Like my parents were at work. I needed to see what the tricks looked like from like the perspective of someone viewing it. So I started filming myself and then like watching the footage back. And then I realized I could make the tricks I was doing way more interesting through like editing. Like I can like move the ball to the other side of the room and then just like cut out me moving it. And so that's how I learned editing, was through making card magic videos.
Oh, that's so clever.
Yeah.
I remember I got into magic. I think it was probably because I was trying to pick up girls, but I don't think that's actually
That's
ever...
also a great way to
get
in there.
Is it? Did it work well for you? Because it didn't work well for me.
I guess like when it comes like down to it, maybe it didn't, but at least I learned how to talk to people.
Right, exactly. Like to approach people. And I I was like way too old to be getting. I don't know. You could get into magic at any age, but I feel like I got into it. Like I was trying to do it. This was early on. Like I was telling you about some of the early stuff I was doing with like hip hop and rappers, and I was shooting behind the scenes music videos for this company called Robot Films, who does like they do a lot of hip hop. It was a Mario music video with Wale was I think he was just hanging out. You know how like all these people just hanging out.
Yeah.
And then like so I was with like a couple friends there, and I was just doing behind the scenes filming. And then they knew like in the car and stuff I was just practicing these magic tricks. And like the one classic magic trick where you palm the card and lift it up, and then they put their card on top, and then you put it back up.
Oh yeah.
And you take off the top card, and put it in the center, and then their card is still on the top. And that is so nerve-wracking to do any kind of trick because like you're like they're gonna see me, and like I don't know, it's very hard to hide those tells.
100%.
And then they ended up they called, like it was during one of the breaks on the music video, they called the whole crew and cast and everybody together.
No.
Literally Mario and Wale are like right next to me. Like Wale is the one that's pulling the card off the top of the deck, and I'm freaking the fuck out. I'm like, dude, I'm so nervous right now.
That's amazing.
And then I ended up like I tricked them. But it was like, it wasn't, because basically what I did was I had two of the same card, which is the only thing that confused them.
Yeah.
Is that, well, okay, I know how you did that part, but I don't know how you did that. But like, doing magic is a really nerve-wracking experience.
Yeah.
Did you ever get totally comfortable with it where you're like, I
got better at it for sure. Because I mean, it was really like 16 hours a day of my life was like doing magic tricks. I got like obsessive to like a weird place. And so I could get pretty comfortable in doing weird sleight of hand stuff. But you think you always get nervous because you're like directly like, I'm going to fool you, and like people want to catch you.
Yeah. They do.
Yeah.
And
like there's nothing bad. I remember like my high school talent show, like I fucked up and like got called out in front of like 500 people. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
I know. It was like real stuff.
That's so hard to like, even, is that one of those memories where you look back and you're still like, oh God.
I know. It just like, it's like cringeworthy. And like, I didn't handle it at all well. I was just like, I forget you guys, I was like, oh God.
Oh, that's so upsetting. It's so bad. If they knew how important it was that they didn't figure it out, I think people would be a little bit more kind. Although I do the same thing. I'm like, especially, when you're watching David Blaine or whatever, once you know a couple of the basic tricks that people do, you kind of know where to look, and you can see their hands, or if like they're doing, I saw David Blaine did one with George Bush where he stole his watch, and you can see him like early on in the trick shake his hand, and that's when he steals it.
Yeah. Misdirection's crazy. Like that's what it all comes down to. You can do anything if you can get someone's attention somewhere.
Yeah, but dude, misdirection is so tough when people are so focused in on you.
Yeah. I think it all depends on the person. Like some people, it's so funny. I didn't expect this to be such a magic conversation, but I love it. This is incredible.
Yeah.
I think there's people who genuinely like want to be in the experience and sort of want to be fooled. And the people who like all they want to do, and maybe this is more of a discussion on like types of people in the world, but they just want to like catch you and like break it. And so it's sort of like, you have to like pick who you're putting your attention towards.
Right. There is like almost like something about humans that are attracted to magic because it's the mystery. It's like the spiritual element to it. It's like the unknown. That's why people are like interested in ghosts and ghost hunting and all that. I had once where my girlfriend, she called me. This is not ghost related. This is, although she is, I think she does believe in ghosts, and she's not comfortable staying in the apartment when I'm not there. But what did we do? We did, she called me late at night. She was out like with work friends, and there was a guy doing magic at the bar, and I'm like, I think he's just trying to pick you up. And she called me from, I think, his phone or something, and then they asked me, she's like, quick, I need you to answer this question. And then I said the word, and then he like was able to call out the word. Yeah. And I don't know how the hell That's did crazy. It. And I'm like, did they have a third line there? Like, yeah. But that's the thing where it's like the rule of magic is don't reveal the secrets or whatever.
Honestly, because the secrets make it sort of boring.
Yeah.
Like a lot of magic tricks are way more simple than what people realize. But like the mystery and like all the buildup makes it so much more entertaining. Like it's funny. I remember being a kid and like people wanted to learn it, and it's like it's disappointing when you learn the trick a lot of times because it's like actually there was just an extra card there. Like that's the whole secret,
Yeah,
like people want it to be this like big massive thing, but it's sort of a letdown.
Do you think in some ways that's true for editing, special effects, filmmaking?
Yeah.
Is it a letdown? I don't know, it's not quite the same kind of thing, but like a lot of people would be like, oh, I would love to just follow you around and be a fly on the wall in your day to day. And you'd be like, it's actually quite boring.
You know what's so funny? I get that DM all the time where people are like, can I just come shadow you for a day? And I'm like, you're just going to sit behind my laptop for 12 hours and like watch me click a few buttons over and over again? I think people want to think there's a trick to it outside of just like doing the work. Mm-hmm. You know?
And I think that also when people see the final video, the final edit, the music and the cuts, and it evokes an emotion and a feeling out of people to the point where they almost think that emotion or feeling is how the whole experience is. Yeah. Like that it's always like high energy. Yeah. It's always excitement. When you said, sometimes it's just 12 hours behind a laptop editing, clicking away.
It's so funny because like as much as so much of my life is editing, I kind of hate editing for that. Like I love like being out in the field and like recording stuff, and especially as I'm doing the more travel things and it's like more extreme and I'm jumping off cliffs and like that's all great. And then the middle ground between like those extremes and like putting the actual video out is kind of like, I don't want to say depressing, but it's just like the lull.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's also very challenging to get through certain edits. Yeah. Like when you just get stuck on something and you're like,
yeah, I mean, creative block's a very real thing.
It's so tough.
Yeah.
I had Joe Beshenkovsky on the podcast a couple episodes ago, and he was talking about he edited the Zen Diaries of Gary Shandling, which is on HBO now. He did Objectified, a bunch of great like when I watch these, I'm like, this guy is a master at editing. He really knows what he's doing. And he's like, the one thing that stood out was like, he's like, storytelling is really challenging, and people don't say that enough. He's like, I don't care if I'm with Judd Apatow or if I'm with Ira Glass. If we're in the room together, there are moments when we're just looking at a problem and just saying, I don't know how the hell we're going to get through this.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is storytelling is really challenging. And sometimes all it is just keep going. Just keep trying to work through a problem.
Yeah. I think that's one thing I've come through recently is I would let myself get a block and I would just like stare at a timeline for hours and be like, I can't move on until I figure out this thing. My biggest way of getting through it is just like keep flipping things. Just like never stop clicking around, and like I'll just like I make like 20 duplicate sequences and I'm just moving different clips, and eventually something will kind of click. That's, for me, is the best way to get through it.
Right. You can't just stare blankly at the page.
Because I have like, I literally, it's funny. I have a project that I've been editing for like 6 months that's going to be like a 2-minute video. And it's because I just can't get through it. I'm just looking at it and I can't, like there's one problem I just can't figure out. And I've just been staring at it. And it's like no good comes out of that.
What's the video? Is this a personal project?
It's a film I shot in Costa Rica last year. And it was a collaboration with a backpack company called Life Pack, who I've become like very friendly with. Mm-hmm. And we were just like, let's just do something. It was like my 24th birthday. I hadn't left the country yet. And I was like, I want to get out of the States and I want to go do something weird. And so we just like packed up bags. We bought flights to Costa Rica with zero plan and spent a week there and just filmed.
Was this the Costa Rica trip that was kind of crazy? You told me a little bit about this.
Yeah, I mean, for being like the first trip out of the country, it got pretty wild. So whenever we were like picking places, like Central America always seemed interesting to me. But when I was getting ready to go, people are like, yo, Central America can be kind of dangerous. Like, really watch your back and everything. So we flew into San Jose, and within 5 minutes of getting our rental car, someone rolls up on a motorcycle, slashes the tires on the car, and like just peels out. And luckily, my friend was sitting in the back seat and saw it happen. So apparently what happens is like they roll up, stab your tires, you pull over to change them, like you're not supposed to see it happen. And then whenever you're out changing the car, people like roll up on you and take all your stuff.
Holy shit, that's so scary.
Yeah. And so it was, luckily we were close enough to like the rental car place. We just drove back, but they were like, yeah, like you were in the parking lot vlogging and they saw your camera and like you were targeted. And I was like, oh my God. Which like being a kid who just like grew up in very like suburban America, like talk about putting yourself outside of your comfort zone quickly.
First time out of the country.
Yeah. First time out of the country. In Central America.
That's the first, dude. I went to Costa Rica too. That was my first trip out of the country.
Really? That's so cool. I think maybe that's just the spot.
Yeah, it's a great spot. Where'd you go in Costa Rica?
So we flew into San Jose, and then we just pretty much drove like the entire country. But we spent a lot of time in Santa Teresa, which is like a little surf village, and then Jaco Beach.
Oh, that's
Those
great,
were like
man.
the two main spots.
It is like, what an amazing experience. The first time in another country, like everything's in Spanish. You're like, whoa, this is cool.
It was so funny because I remember like doing the customs form on the plane. It was the first time I had ever seen something where like Spanish was the primary language, which maybe makes me sound like super uncultured and everything, but like even that was a strange experience.
Right. I think there's an element now that like our world is so opened up that we can see and experience other cultures online, but I think that you still have to go there I think it's
100%.
it's maybe something that's like kind of unconscious that happens,
Yeah.
but you're just like, when you're fully immersed in another culture, it does open yourself up, and you're like, oh shit, there's more than just
Yeah,
New Jersey.
it's funny because like, so it was August of last year, so it's been less than a year. It was the first time I left the country. I've since left almost 20 times, I think, with Gary. Like, it got really crazy last year.
Got
like,
weird.
Like every other day I was out of the country. But I feel like I've grown up more in the last year, like experiencing the rest of the world. And I think maybe that's where like the passion for all these like travel projects I'm trying to do is like getting more outside of your comfort zone and seeing other parts of like how the world lives is insane.
It just changes your perspective
Completely.
So back to there was one more part of that story where you guys almost drove off a cliff.
Yeah.
What was that about?
Wild. So we had like this crazy Jeep rental car, and our whole like motto was like, if we're gonna go for it, we're really gonna go for it, and like off road the whole way. And so we're driving from like one village to another, and we got to this like cliff where it was like right at golden hour, and it was just amazing. So like we like stopped, we pulled out everything, and we filmed for like an hour, but it killed all of our daylight. So we were driving through the jungle for the rest of the night in like pitch black darkness. And the guy driving, Adrian, who's like become one of my best friends, was just being dumb. We're doing like 70 miles an hour through like the jungle, just like you can't see anything.
Oh, shit.
And all throughout the day, he had been purposefully hitting puddles to like make a splash and just like for fun stuff. And for some reason, we're like blasting through, and he doesn't hit this puddle that's off to the side, but it's huge. And then I'm like, wait a second, and I like freak out and start screaming. I'm like, I think that's a cliff. And we were literally maybe a foot away from just straight driving off the side of a mountain.
What the fuck?
Yeah,
dude.
It was like,
oh god, I don't even like hearing that story because he was doing the puddles the whole time.
I know. I was like literally because it was so dark, it just looked like a puddle off to the side.
Wow.
Like I was like, we could have died.
That could have been it.
Yeah.
Isn't that what? That changes you, I think. Like when you were like that close to a near-death experience, you're like, that could have been it. That could have been the end of my life.
Yeah.
What a fuck, that would have sucked,
I
right?
know. First time out of, I know. Like just thinking back to it, I was like, actually a lot of things I did on that trip were just super dumb. Like I think I played way too close to the edge. But yeah, first time out of the country, that was kind of extreme.
What's your thought process in a near-death experience like that? Is it like what are you thinking?
I think in the moment I wasn't thinking. The more I look back at it, I'm like, wow, like it could have actually gone really bad really quickly.
Yeah.
You know, like it's funny because my friends that we're with, like we joke about it a lot, but like if you really think about it, like that could have been completely life altering. So like really don't waste a second because we're in like Costa Rica. We're like, yo, we're going to go have fun. We're making a movie. Like it's just going to be this adventure. Like look how great life is. And like it could have gone bad really quickly. But yeah, like Jeff Staple, who is he's a fashion designer. He runs Staple Pigeon out of New York. If there's anyone that I sort of like, if I like compare who I want to be like when I grow up, it's him. And he says that too. He's like, yeah, near-death experiences are crazy. Like you should try and have some every now and then. You know, like, He's like, don't die, but you know, if you can get close,
just near enough, just like some bad turbulence.
Yeah, like it wakes you up a little bit more.
So you go to Costa Rica and you're shooting all this footage. You've got tons of it, and that was a year or 2 years ago. And what's the problem now? What's the challenge in this edit? What's the problem that you're not getting through?
I think there's a few things. One, it's personal expectations on this was my first big project outside of work, outside of like when I was looking at where I want the future of my career to go. I was like, I'm really into like travel films and doing, you know, weird branded content. So I think a ton of it is completely mental, and that I won't let myself get through it because I need it to be perfect. And I think perfection's super dangerous. But I've restarted the edit probably 10 times, and I'm trying to like get it better and better and better. But I think, honestly, I think it's all romantic, me needing it to be perfect.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I don't think that it's going to be...
Because it's my first, and the funny thing is I've now done other travel films that I put out sooner because it's like whatever, it's just another video. But for some reason, like that one being the first one, it's like my baby. You're
probably never gonna finish it, or you're never gonna be happy with.
I literally have been thinking about it. I like brought the hard drive on this trip because I was thinking I was gonna work on it. I'm like, I might just export whatever it is. Like it might have black spots, and I'm just gonna get it out there in the world and like fuck it, you know.
So this wasn't actually a client project.
Not necessarily. So I'm a big component on like free work, and also I'm so busy with Gary that I hate taking money from people because of like deadline expectations, and I have just like no real control in my life. So I like, a lot of people ask me to do collaborations and stuff, and I will, but it's always like I'm doing it for free at my own pace, and like we'll figure it out as we get there.
So have you ever done paid work or paid client work at this point?
When I was younger, so like coming up through Florida, the transition from Florida to New York, I was really into fashion photography, and so I had sort of hacked it there. I was doing a lot of like catalog stuff for like local stores. I definitely had a wedding phase where I was shooting a ton of weddings, senior portraits, like all that stuff. But it was a pretty short gap. I've been sort of like a salary creator for the majority of my career.
What was that transition like coming to New York? Like, why'd you decide to leave school, pack up your bags?
I felt like I was at a point where it was either you're going to have like a very stable life and like get serious about school and like do that and then get a job and like take that route, or you're going to have that moment of like, fuck it, I think I can do something bigger. Like, I'm just going to jump. And at that point, I was 21 when I moved to New York. So I was like, all right, I'm at a place where like, I just have to do it. Like, I just can't wonder what if anymore.
The original name of this podcast was going to be, when I was living in New York, How to Make It in New York. Yeah. Because just for some, I don't know how I made it, and I just think of other people that are moving to the city and the kind of rent that you have to pay and how low salaries are when you first get started. You're making $35,000 a year, and like rent costs like $15,000 to $20,000 plus a year. And it's like, how the hell do people get by? Yeah. What was that like in the very beginning? You're 21 years old. Are you living with roommates? How do you get your first internship?
Yeah. So, luckily I had locked in the internship before I moved. It was like, that was like the catalyst of like getting that. It was like, all right, I'm big on like patience and waiting for the stars to align. But I always say like, when it looks like the stars are aligned, like all in, pot committed, go. So I had been saving a lot of money, knowing that there was probably going to be a transition coming up soon. So I had a little bit in the bank, and then the internship happened and I just like packed up 2 bags, bought a one-way ticket and left. Posted a Facebook status at the time because I had like no following at this point. I was like, yo, anyone know of a room in New York? So I got this little crummy spot that was far too expensive in Bushwick, and moved in there. The first 6 months that I was there, I was making $12 an hour as an intern, like making nothing. So it was super tight. It was like the peanut butter and jelly ramen diet every meal, 6 months, like no questions asked. But I think I was okay with it. Like I think if you go in with that mentality of like, you're cool, like you're going to cut all luxuries, like it's just like, you're going to put your head down and work and figure it out. It honestly didn't feel that difficult to me. Mm-hmm. You know, what about you? Was it like a real grind?
When I first got to Hoboken, I would say it wasn't like a real grind. And the thing was that I lived at home with my parents for 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I'm all about, like you, it's like waiting for the stars to align, but at the same time, like being conservative and me going into $100,000 in student loan debt, that was my wake-up call to be like, dude, you just can't make decisions so flippantly. Like maybe you should have listened to your parents, and community college would have been good for a couple of years. Yeah. So at that point, I also realized how much of a weight that money and that debt was weighing over me. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I need to be very mindful about the decisions that I'm making moving forward. So I paid off a lot of my debt. I mean, I probably had $60,000 by the time I left to go to move to New York. But then also, when you talk about like security and safety, it's like we all get comfortable with a certain amount of money in our bank account. Yeah. And for me, like it started out, I had like $13, which I wasn't comfortable with at all. Right. But then when you save that first $1,000, then I'm like, all right, now I'm like, I feel good. I feel, especially not having rent. Yeah. I'm like, I feel pretty comfortable with that. And then it was knowing that I'd probably have to get, especially as a freelancer, somebody following an untraditional path. I'm like, I need at least like 15 to 20,000 to where I will be super comfortable knowing that even if I have 3 to 4 months where I don't get any work, I can still pay off my bills and some. So that was my mentality going into it. So I was very conservative. And then having that money and having that runway was just everything. Like I didn't stress out about rent ever. Yeah. You would stress out about, am I gonna, is the work gonna come in or the jobs come in? But eventually they always do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's fun just like to pivot on that to like try and provide more value to people. I think Casey Neistat has this quote, and it's like, it's something about like your willingness to take risk, like will expand your life. And I'm big on that. Like I think taking risks and like walking away from opportunities and trying like the untraditional path is huge. But I've also seen people who just like you have to be pretty realistic with it. Like, don't like make a jump if you have no money, you know, because like it's still the way the world works.
Right. Well, because if you do jump before you have your parachute and you're trying to build your parachute on the way down, you're more likely to give up and to fail if you don't have that security net.
Because eventually you're like, fuck, I have to pay bills. Like, I'm gonna have to go get a traditional J job, and then you get complacent, and then it's like I literally think jumping too early is like the demise of everything.
I think you're totally right. And I think that's the thing, though, because like that's the advice everybody gives is just take the jump, do it. And like, yes, do it, but be thoughtful about it. Like, make sure that you have enough money to get by. Make sure that like your partner can help support if things go wrong. Like there's a lot of things you have to think about. And like you said, this is the real world. This is like, we have to be practical about these decisions that we're making in life. So what was the internship, that first job?
It was at Vayner.
Oh, it was at Vayner. Okay, cool.
So it was funny because I had, Chase Jarvis, like Seattle photographer. He was always, as I was growing up in Florida, I was like, I want to be that guy. I'm going to work for him one day. And so he had a podcast that Gary was on. And then at the end of that podcast, I had no idea who Gary was. I was like, fuck, I think I actually want to work for Gary. He seems way more interesting. Yeah. And so then it was like every move I was making was like, how do I work for Gary? So the master plan was get an internship at Vayner, eventually turn that internship into like a staff job, work for a couple of years, meet Gary in the hallway and be like, yo, I want to work directly with you. Like that was in theory how it was going to play out. Instead it was I got a graphic design internship, did that for like 6 or 7 months. And then there was a freeze on hiring creatives. They were just like, all right, we're going to hold off for a little bit. And so I had been like just grinding my face off for like 7 months. And then I get an email one day and it's like, sorry, we don't have a job for you. Like, see ya. So that was devastating. That was like the one moment where I can be like, yo, New York really punched me in the face. And I walked out and like had no idea what was next. I like thought I was going to move back home. And like, it was like, all right, gonna go get my desk job, you know? And so I emailed Gary and I was like, yo, I came here because I wanted to say what's up to you and eventually wanted to work with you, but like, I got to leave. So can I have 5 minutes to say what's up? That meeting got canceled, but I was like, it's my last day. It has to happen. So he was jumping in an Uber. I jumped with him. And luckily it was at like 3:00 in the afternoon. So New York traffic was completely gridlocked. And our 5-minute meeting turned into an hour. And then by the end of that, pieces were pretty much set in place that I think the next day I was on his team working directly with him. And so it's been 2 years.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. How did that Uber come down? How did that actually happen? Like, were you like waiting outside for Gary to come out of the office, or was that like kind of a little bit part of the plan where it's like, hey, my meeting just got canceled, but we can hop in this Uber?
So that's basically how it happened. Initially, it was like, yo, we're going to reschedule you for next week. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be here next week. Like, it has to happen. And he was like, all right, screw it. You can go and just ride with him. So it was like, jumped in the car. I was so prepared for a 5-minute meeting with Gary. Like, I just had everything locked in. And then the entire plan is out the fucking window in 2 minutes because I was just like, oh, we actually have to have a conversation now and I have to like be on my feet. And so I was like nervous, like shaking in the car. And
well, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Like,
right.
That's what, I think Tyson said it, where it's like you get into the ring and then all of a sudden all bets are off and you just got to figure out what the fuck you're doing.
The thing that's amazing too is it's like D-Rock, the other video guy on Gary's team who's been there about 2 years before me, he's in the car with us filming the entire conversation. So our entire meeting is like documented in history. Like, wow, it's amazing. I want to put it out, but I actually just found the footage recently and watched it and I sound so ridiculous.
Excuse me, Mr. Gary. Was it bad? But then, so you're nervous. That's kind of what I would expect for it to be. Although like, I was like, maybe you just turned it on and
I didn't.
It's like Will Ferrell in that movie where he blacks out and like is a great debater. So you're in the car and like you're nervous, but then what is it about that like inspires Gary to have you come on?
I mean, I was pretty audacious because at this point I'm like, yo, I gotta just put all my chips on the table. And so it was literally got in the car. I was like, I want to work for you. And he's like, he kind of like laughs and he's like, okay, what do you do? You know? And so we just talked for a long time and he asked me like my opinions on what his content was doing and what I think that I could add and what could be changed. And I really had no answer. It was completely like fake it till you make it, just trying to sound as smart as possible, but he bought it. And so walking out of that, he asked me to make a few pieces of content. And so he's like, make like 5 things of how you would do it if you were on the team. And I was like, all right. And so he like kicks me out on 57th Street. I run straight to a Starbucks, like just grind out for like 2 hours, email. I just wanted it to be like as fast as possible. So it was like, they were pretty sloppy, but I just needed to like get something in his inbox. And then a couple days later, I get a call to like HR, and it was funny because I thought this was like the last day of my internship. I was like, cool. It's like the thanks for coming by. Like, give me your name badge and all that. And she's like, do you know why you're here? And I said, no. And she's like, you're starting on Gary's team tomorrow. And I was like,
shit, that's gotta feel so good.
It was crazy.
Dude, I love that. I mean, I think the couple things that obviously you know Gary very well and what he would respond to. Yeah. And it was like, I think just like the initiative and the hustle that you put into that, both just in the meeting and just making that shit happen. Like, you made that happen. Yeah. And then 2 hours later, like, I love that. Just like, because some people would just let that opportunity go, or they might like take too long to send an email. You can't send an email a week later. Yeah. Like, you're like, fuck, I'm gonna do this right now. Like, it was, what did you make in those 2 hours?
It was, like, he does a lot of like quote cards for Instagram. So it was 4 of those where I just like found pictures of him off Google and like slotted them in. Luckily, they had his brand style guide on like the VaynerMedia server. So I had found that earlier and I was like familiar with like the fonts and stuff. And I was like, cool. So I made like 4 like very on brand like quote cards, and then 1 video where I just like ripped an interview off YouTube really quick and like threw some stock footage on top of it with like words flying across the screen.
Wow. That's great, man. That had to feel so good.
Yeah. So that was the moment of like, I remember walking out of that meeting and like I walked into a stairwell and like just sat down. It was like a scene out of a movie, and just sat down and was like, wow, like I did it, you know, which it was like, that was just the beginning, but that was the moment where I was like, cool, like, I think I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. Make or break moment.
Yeah.
Like, this is it, right?
Yeah. Because it would literally, dude, like literally I would have moved back to Florida, I think. Because at this point, I had been making so little money. I had like blown through a lot of the savings that I had saved up just on rent in those 6 months. And I was like kind of like getting down to the wire, and was like, all right, I'm just going to have to go back home, like move back in with Dad, and I'll figure it out once I get there.
Skill-wise, craft-wise, as a filmmaker, photographer, designer, you know, I look at your Instagram today, it's like beautiful. All the photos are stunning, like super high quality, really creative. Jump back to that moment. Like, were you that good, or have you just developed like crazy over the past 2 years?
I definitely have developed like crazy. Yeah. I think when you surround yourself with like people, I think that's actually the hack, is like get yourself in rooms with people that are substantially better than you, and then you're going to have to level up quickly. I think for me, that's been the biggest thing. And especially being in New York, I have that great benefit of like, New York's the place where all the best creatives in the world go to prove themselves. It's just like the overall energy of that city. You're like, all right, I really got to step my shit up, you know? But yeah, I would say in the last 2 years, it's funny, if you actually go to my website and look in the photo section, none of it's updated in 2 years. And so you can really see the delta between like my Instagram and the website of like, there's been a jump.
This has been the shift over the past 2 years. What man, so as you start to onboard, do you remember the first day, or at least the first week or so?
You know what's so funny? Out of that HR meeting, she said, cool, Gary wants you to go be a designer on his team. And I said, cool. And then the very first day there, they handed me a hard drive of videos, and they're like, cool, you're a video editor. And mind you, I've, at this point, had taken a break from video for like a year. And then all of a sudden it was like, figure out video again. And so I had like a lot of like base level knowledge and stuff, but it was definitely completely like, this isn't what I signed up for.
So yeah, like you hadn't put in that many hours in terms of editing. It's not like that's been like, that was your craft for the past couple years.
That wasn't my bread and butter at all. It was photography and design. And so I had to like crash course of like not sleeping for 6 months and learning as much about video as possible.
Wow. Yeah. Right. You talk about, like, that's the thing that I tell a lot of people. It's like, dude, it doesn't matter what you're doing in college. It matters what you're doing outside of the classroom. It's like, you got to put in the work. And like, if you take 6 months and you're just like pounding it against the pavement, then like, that's when you're going to make the biggest progress.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was getting into the office at 7 a.m, leaving at 10 p.m, and then from 10 to 2 a.m, watching tutorials on YouTube of like trying to like really learn the nitty gritty. And then also I luckily was able to like step up, and they were like, oh, they seem, even though like the edits are rough, like you've got potential. And so I got thrown into the deep end of editing daily V every day, 7 days a week for like 6 months.
Wow.
And you kind of have no other choice but to like learn the craft really quickly.
High stakes too, man.
Very.
It's not like this is going out to a couple thousand people.
No, it's like a YouTube channel with 1 million subscribers.
Right.
You know.
So what's that? I mean, I guess what's the approval process like there, and like how does that look when you're making a piece? And I'm sure it's evolved over time as you've gotten better. But like when you're starting to make these pieces that go out to this large audience, what's the approval?
I mean, so the cool thing is Gary sort of doesn't care in terms of creative. So for the longest time, he was watching all the videos, but it was not to judge it creatively. It was to judge it based on like confidentiality and like what could actually be out there in the world. Because when you figure we are filming, 8 hours a day of meetings, there's a lot of stuff that like the world shouldn't be hearing. And so he was always watching it just to check those things and to like cut them out here and there. Now he like trusts us enough, and we've been in it for so long that we know in general. We always go more on the vanilla side to make sure that like everything's safe that's going out there in the world, but we have no approval process. Like I film it, I edit it, I upload it the next day.
And that's it.
And that's it.
There's so much content that you're creating. So like, I think let's start there. Like what kind of content are you guys making now when you look at, because you have, VaynerMedia and you have like all that stuff aside. There's lots of stuff and lots of companies going around, but now we're just talking about Gary Vee. He's got this personal brand and he's got content creators like you that work together. How big's the team and how much content are you guys putting out?
Yeah. So, that's one of the biggest things to start off with. The delta between VaynerMedia and Gary Vee's like personal team are very different. We very like rarely are like crossing paths. And so we function very differently. Like when I say there's no approval process, like in typical agency world, it has to go through 8 rounds of approval before anything goes live. So that's a big difference. Currently, Gary's team floats around 23 to like 25 people. We're always sort of like people are coming in and out. And the large majority of that is creative. So there's 4 people that are working on video at all times. There's, 4 designers. There's a writer. We have a developer who's full-time working on apps and stuff like that. Overall people who are managing brand. Gary has 2 assistants. Like it's all like a big machine. All of the content stems out of like pillars, right? So there's the Ask Gary Vee show and Daily Vee. Those kind of overlap, but everything else just stems from all that footage. So those are the 2 hero pieces. And then it's what's the best minute out of this day that we filmed in Daily Vee, which turns into an Instagram clip for 60 seconds. And then there's a 130-second version that goes on Facebook. And then we strip the audio out of it, and that goes on SoundCloud for the podcast. And then the writer watches an episode, recaps it, and writes a blog post. And then that goes on LinkedIn. So that's like, it all starts with 2, and then everything like teeters down.
I love that, because like when you're first looking at it, 23 people sounds crazy. I'm like, what the hell? That's a like huge, massive team. But then the pillars is so important, because otherwise I feel like it would just be so scattered. It's like, and to organize that, and you like, I don't know if you have any like project managers in there as well, or it's just kind of Gary and then it's just creators. Really, is that?
It's, for the most part, it's just Gary and then creators, and I would say that's probably our weaker point. Is we sort of need someone to be a little bit more like orchestrating and like making sure things are like organized and stuff. And we've gotten way better at it now than what we were a year ago. So we have like, Gary has his own server that everything gets managed on by date and time and all that stuff. As opposed to a year and a half ago, like it was when it was just D-Rock and I, it was everything was on portable drives scattered. There's like 20 drives on my desk. And so if someone's like, find this piece of footage, and I'm like, it's going to take 12 hours so I can search all these things. It was a mess. But we've really like, we're tightening up and getting it pretty put together, but we're also just doing something that's never really been done before. You know, like how many people have 25 people that just work on their personal brand? Like
wild. That's crazy. I mean, insane, you look at like somebody like Tim Ferriss, massive podcast. His team's like 2-3 people tops. Yeah. Like it's like he's got 1 full-time employee, I think, and then maybe interchangeable 1 or 2. He's not creating the amount of content that you guys are putting out. You're just like putting out a massive amount of content. And that's the only way that you can do it is like, I mean, that's the thing that I struggle with too, because I'm like, it's a 1-person team. And like, that's what you need to do in the very beginning when you're starting out. But it was for me trying to figure out, all right, like what do I want to focus on? Like what's my most important thing? And I'm like, all right, podcasts, ground up show. Let me focus on that. And then how can I, just like you guys, separate the 2, but then there's also like, I don't know, you have to also be drawn to what's making an impact, right? Like how much of that changes what you're doing, where you see that some videos are doing really well or performing really well. Does that shift your perspective of how you create content moving forward?
Absolutely. I mean, we're always like nitpicking the format of videos on Instagram, and like we're seeing what's working. We do a weekly recap every day, or not every day, but every week, where we say, all right, these are the things that performed best. Why were these different than other ones, and how can we take those elements and like deploy it further? And then we make things that are timely. So Gary had a video a couple of years ago about graduating from college that went bonkers and did 50 million views or something on Facebook. And so we have a whole content plan around that piece of footage that we're going to really distribute even harder this year in like a couple weeks whenever everyone's graduating from college.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So you can kind of start to plan that out and look at cultural moments and these. I mean, because like VaynerMedia, like core part of that is like strategy, content creation, and like working with brands and figuring out how to deliver for them. Mm-hmm. And it's like, all right, let's take those same kind of methods and ideas and implement it for Gary's actual personal brand. Can we Ask Gary Vee? What is Ask Gary Vee and what's the other one?
Daily Vee. So Ask Gary Vee is the question and answer podcast show, which is like literally there's a phone in the middle, there's two guests, they're calling people and just having like business questions or life questions answered. And then Daily Vee is the documentation of Gary's life, and that wherever he is, there's someone there with a camera that's filming it.
Okay. And then the Ask Gary, you said there's an overlap between them. Is that because then sometimes you'll take excerpts from the... Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just in terms of like Gary's living his life. If he's doing a question and answer show that day, there's a person in there filming the question and answer show, and like bits and pieces of that might go in at different places.
Right. And how often is the podcast?
Totally ebbs and flows based on Gary's calendar. Because that's the thing is so many people think Gary's just like a motivational speaker and like hangs out and does cool stuff, but 95% of his time is spent like running an advertising agency, and he's just living his life. So if he's, super intense on the business side, we might go 2 or 3 weeks without an Ask Gary Vee. Sometimes we have 4 a week. It's totally different.
Do you guys stockpile these as in like in terms of recording them, like to create consistency, or is it like sometimes you'll have 2 weeks without an episode being released?
Yeah.
Or so it's like basically you say if you recorded and shot a podcast episode today, how long does it take to come out? And
it'll all get slotted in. So basically we have a content calendar that's built out for like a week usually. That's all we're sort of working with of what we know is going out. But that's all random. So it might be a Daily Vee episode and then a keynote that he gave. And then maybe it's a full-length meeting out of a Daily Vee. That'll go in one day. Like we're totally like fixing the plane as we fly it, just like figuring it out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, we might go 2 weeks without an Ask Gary Vee, but also we don't keep anything in the tank. Like if it's done, it's going out. That's that's a big thing with us too, is just like overall speed. So if we film an Ask Gary Vee yesterday, it's probably going to go out within the next 2 days.
I think that's probably an element to a larger operation like that, right? Like,
yeah, I was going to say like that's how we're able to function with so many people. Is it's like we film it, and then there's an editor who their only job is to make sure like the video gets edited, it gets ready for the podcast, and that micro content, the Instagram clips are ready for that. We make sure that the guest has stuff. Like it's a whole like structured thing.
What's the strategy behind this content that you're creating? Is there like an overarching strategy or goal or I guess like how do you know what kind of content to be making?
So when people ask like the overall goal, it's Gary's thing is like you build a personal brand and that other doors start opening when the world knows who you are, right? So if like Gary's clouds is that he wants to buy the New York Jets, the best thing to do is get the most of the world to know who Gary is so that more business opportunities open, that he can take those, leverage it, and eventually do the thing he wants to do, which is buy the Jets. Right? Does that make sense? Like it's all like I hate
about buying the Jets.
Yeah. Well, I hate saying like our strategy is make Gary the most famous person in the world, but that's sort of what it is in a weird way. It's get as many people because a lot of VaynerMedia clients that are coming through are like coming through because of the personal brand work we're doing.
Right? Because people know who Gary is.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's a lot of this is very personal based, and as it's funny because if you look at the way that blogs and personalities, online personalities have evolved over time, in the very beginning it was very personal. Like a lot of people would be like, this is whatever, like Huffington Post, and maybe like just Ariana Huffington writing blog posts, and then it turns into a company and an organization. But now you see a lot of people going back to personal, and I've seen a lot of big brands go from being a big company to them more so focusing on their personal brand.
Yeah, because you can leverage them in a lot of different ways, right? It's like you building your personal brand and doing a podcast around like filmmakers and creatives. It then opens up to like people being more siphoned into you, and it's going to let you grow your own business more. Yeah,
it helps to uplift everything else.
Everything, yeah.
What takeaways have you learned over the past couple years working with Gary and creating content for him that you could implement with your own? Because as you've been doing this, your platform has started to rise. You've built up an Instagram following, and you're starting to see more people come for the content that you create, not the content you're creating for Gary.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one big thing is I try and keep like my personal Instagram and the work I do for Gary pretty separate. I'm pretty subtle with like, you know, I do mention like in my bio, I'm like, I do creative for Gary Vee, and like that's sort of our only real connection. I try to keep the rest somewhat separate. The biggest things I've learned from him, one is definitely distribution, right? The idea of like taking one piece of content and how do you take one piece of content and turn it into 50 pieces has been such a massive game changer for me in terms of like whenever I do eventually step out and go do my own thing, I'll know how to like get as many eyes on it as possible. And then a lot of stuff comes down to like life, right? Like the more like motivational-esque things of just like, you only live once and you got to like swing the bat as hard as you possibly can to get the most out of this.
That's the hard thing for me is like the line between the motivational stuff, because like, dude, I love it. Like I wouldn't be here without Tony Robbins and all these like self-help books and like every book that I read when I was started to come up. So important. But then also like to bring in the real and not be cheesy, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the 100%. Thing that Gary does great is like it's not corny.
Yeah.
But then like you see so many imitation Garys out there, people trying to be the next Gary Vee, and you're like, dude, you're not it. You're just pretending like you're making it, but you haven't made it.
1,000%. Yeah, I think just the level of authenticity is what. And people can just smell it, you know, like they know when you're like saying real shit.
Yeah. When you admit that like you don't have it all put together.
Yeah.
Because not everybody is going to be like that super confident, like quick on their feet person. Like that's the thing is like everybody's trying to be the next Tim Ferriss or Gary or whatever. And it's like, you got to figure out your own path and make it your own.
I mean, that's the funniest thing. If you set out with the goal of like, and this sounds super cliche, like if you set out the goal to like, I'm going to be the next Gary, I'm going to make a lot of money, I'm going to do this. Like, it's probably not going to work. You have to be very internal of like, and that's a big thing I'm dealing with is like, what am I here for? Like, what's the best thing I'm at? Like, the best thing I'm doing? How can I make the best impact on the world? How can I create the best content and it be authentic? And like, me focusing on that is like the reason why I think it'll work. You know, it all comes down to like the proper intent.
Yeah, I think you have to do some like soul searching and really figure out what connects with you and what you want to get out there. And like going back to, we were talking before the podcast where I was telling you about my story of getting into minimalism and just like redefining your idea of success and being like, all right, well, what would success look like to me? Is it like owning this company or creating this, or is it like something a little bit more simple? Like what's the bare minimum I would want to get out of this?
Yeah.
And then once you achieve those goals, just keep pushing yourself further. You know what I mean? Because like you're always, if you're working towards your goals, you're eventually going to get there, unless it's like become an astronaut or something like maybe you'll get that. But like, I feel like you always need to be pushing yourself a little bit further.
Yeah. How do you think, like, I'm just curious of your opinion when you say like, you have to go soul search and everything, because that's something like, it's advice I'm giving too. And then people are like, but how do I do that? And I'm always like, oh, I don't fucking know. You know what I mean?
Right,
like,
like, yeah.
It's like, why is the sky blue? You know, like
I think it's there's a couple things. The biggest thing for me was just asking questions.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we find ourselves going down this path and being guided there from other people, by media, by family, by friends, like all these outside influences.
Yeah.
And we say, okay, yeah, that's where I'm going to go. And that's how I felt when I just graduated, even going to college. And after that, it's like, why am I making these decisions? And then when I started to step back and be like, well, what would success look like for me? You know, how much do I actually need to be happy? Do I need a big mansion, or is there something else that would be more fulfilling if I followed this path? So I think it starts with asking questions of yourself. And the thing is that never ends. Like, and we're always learning, and a lot of times we're making the same mistakes. And, you know, I try to develop mindfulness practices and meditation and stop checking my phone so much. And it's like, sometimes we forget and sometimes we need to come back, but that's why I think you have to just always continually be asking yourself. Yeah. And then the other thing I would say is read a lot, like read a lot of books. I think for me, there was something about the reading of books that was more motivating and inspiring than just watching a documentary or watching a video online. As much as like Will Smith isn't crazy inspiring and you can watch these videos on YouTube and you like are blown away. I think there's something about a book that if you're reading it over the course of a couple weeks, those kind of the ideas go a little bit further. And also, most people don't finish books that they start. So if you can at least finish a book, there's almost an accomplishment in that and a drive to implement what you've learned into your life.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's funny, like finding like motivational stuff like reading or something, there's got to be like meat behind it. Like you were saying, like the Will Smith, like motivational, like, you know, violin, piano behind him talking is great. And it like hypes you up and you're like, cool. But then you sit there and you're like, wait a second. I'm just like energized right now. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think finding things that I almost like, and I don't know, I go back and forth on like telling people this, but finding the people who you most want to be like, or that you think are taking like similar life trajectories. People's lives are so well documented now. You can really like learn a lot about a person and sort of map your life in a similar way.
Yeah, and I think Tim Ferriss gives similar advice where he's like, find people. That's what he tries to do, is like find like a top performance athlete or find a bodybuilder, and then figure out how they did it, and then just reverse engineer to do that.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think that you just have to make sure that that's truly the path that you want to be on.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody's a little bit different. Everybody's circumstance is so different and so 100%. Individual that try not to force it. If you feel like you're forcing this path on top of it and it doesn't feel right, then you might be off course.
Yeah, I think using it as like a general like model of where you're going. Like I get so many people that email me and they're like, how do I get a job with Gary? And I'm like, there's no answer for that, because my path was like so weird and different. Like if there was a straight line to get from point A to point B, everyone would be doing the thing they want to do. So it's like find like the roadmap, but be okay with like going different places.
What's like the most common question that people are asking you, like creators and people who are trying to be at the place that you're at now? Like what do they most often ask you?
I mean, I always get like technical questions of like, what camera are you shooting on? Like, what are you editing on? Which is funny because I hate talking technicals of like photography and video.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get a lot of people that are just like, you know, I'm finishing school. What's the first move? And I'm just like, I don't know. You know, like that's the tough thing, because like this world's so weird and strange and like creative and like content, and like the ground's moving so fast. But I always just say like putting out as much stuff as possible, you know?
Yeah. So this is actually something that I don't know if I could totally agree with it. The advice that I've been giving is make shit every day, but don't release shit every day. And that's the challenge, and is because you have the people that just do the daily vlogs every single day. And it's like, most people's lives aren't that interesting. So I'm wondering if maybe, since everybody's going that route, everybody's running to like shoot, create, post every single day or very often, it's like, maybe it's create every day, but maybe release less often. How do you feel about that? Do you think it actually is important to release content every day to get that feedback?
I think they go hand in hand, right? I don't necessarily think putting stuff out every day has to be the motto, but also don't hang on to things too much. So we met with like, I won't like name names, but we met with a hip hop artist recently who last year had like the biggest song, like it just exploded, and he debated for like months about putting it out, and it almost didn't get put out. And now like that person's career is in such a dramatically different place based off one song. You know, so Gary will always say like your life is one piece of content away from changing. Like, you know, there might be something you recorded the other day that you're like, nah, fuck it, it's not good enough, and that might be the thing that changes all of it.
It's hard. Well, yeah, I've heard that. I actually saw that episode, and the one thing that stuck with me that I'm not sure I agree with is that like Gary said that quality is subjective. I just don't know if that's true. Like, because I to a degree, yes, right? But then also, like, if we were to look at somebody's first day filmmaking, or, you know what I mean? There's definitely a level, right? And a bar that you would need to pass for it to stick.
Absolutely. I think whenever he says that, he more so means, like, it's subjective in terms of, like, story is king. You know? So there's been tons of pieces of content he's made where he's, you know, on a flight and records something on a webcam, and it's some of the most viral shit we have, you know? And it's, like, because the story is really solid there. And then there are days where, like I'll set out and be like, I'm going to make the most cinematic, like swaggy piece of video we've ever made. And it gets like no views.
Yeah, dude, I've had the same thing where I had this video, it's called The New Self-Reliance. And I'm creating this metaphor, like self-reliance used to be like building fires and creating shelter and all this stuff. And now self-reliance is building an audience and, you know, creating a following and all this stuff. And I was like, I was really impressed with it. I'm like, this is going to be dope. Like, this is going to be, I'm like, I went out into the desert and shot some footage. And like, that. I really took a lot of effort to create it. And like nothing, I mean, you know, it's good compared to what I was used to be getting, but like still like compared to current traffic that I'm getting on some of my videos, like it was a dud.
Yeah.
And then I do a video in my apartment, my minimalist apartment, and it gets like half.
It explodes.
It's get 500,000 views, and I'm like, what the hell? Like,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think there's a balance there, right? Like, you do want to be able to express yourself and create where you're drawn to. Like, if your gut tells you, like, oh man, I just really want to tell that story.
Yeah.
You probably should just follow that, but then balance it with like, keep putting shit out there, you know, experimenting, seeing what sticks. Because I think a lot of times we get surprised, but by like, oh, that one did well, that song did well.
I know.
Wouldn't have guessed it.
Yeah. I mean, the market decides everything.
It does. Yeah, I guess that's the pitch for releasing all the time, is that eventually you'll find out. And nobody's watching your shit in the beginning anyway.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about what you're making.
Yeah, dude, that's, you know, it's so funny you say that. I think people are definitely in like the first couple of years way too romantic about it. It's like, just like test everything. I still, even now, like am throwing everything against the wall, you know?
Yeah, you might be convincing me. I may become more towards that, but then still, I like, now that I've started to build up an audience, I do still feel that I like need to deliver every time, right? Because then like I feel like if you're delivering shit every once in a while, or if you have too many duds, then people will stop trusting you.
Yeah, I definitely say once you do have eyes on you, like you have to be giving them what they signed up for, right? So that's been a biggest thing, is I'm scared to go too far off like what I'm putting out every day, because I'm like, this is why all these people are here. Like, they're here because I do this thing. And so I'd never want to go too far off that, but like maybe this isn't the thing I'm best at. You know, like maybe if I shift a little bit this way, like that's where the real magic happens.
Right.
You know, so I don't think you can lock yourself too much into having the day-to-day expectations of like making this thing.
So how do you see your content evolving, your platform evolving? Like, what kind of stuff do you want to be making and continuing to make in the future for yourself?
I mean, so I've mentioned like the travel thing a lot. There's something about like, as I've started to see more of the world, I think, so New York's weird. You get into this weird vortex of like, everyone's like, you just put your head down, you just grind 24/7, right? And I'm sure you felt that way too. But then as I've started traveling more, I'm like, yo, the world's really dope. Like, I like seeing it. So being able to like experience the world through a camera and like document the travels has been a lot of fun. I wanted to be an actor when I was a kid. So like this idea of being, you know, more of like a character in my content is big. But yeah, the biggest thing I'm having an issue with now is like, I'm almost too much into like the eye candy. Like, I'm great at like making things that visually look good, but I'm like, what's the meat behind it? So that's sort of, as I'm in this transition of like, what's my impact on the world? You know, and I think that's something that I can't just like sit down and be like, all right, let me think about it. Like, it'll naturally come as it evolves, but I want to create content that helps younger creators understand a little bit more how like the industry works and like how to like make moves in it. And then also just, I don't know, push people to like live the life they're happier with.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like, we're on the same path, like the same kind of creation. It's like making content for content creators. And like, I just love these kind of conversations, and I find it so interesting because there's so many different paths that you can go down, and we don't have unlimited amount of time in the day. So we need to figure out, all right, what do I really want to make and what direction do I want to head in? Because it's very easy to go down the wrong path.
Absolutely.
And I love some of the videos that you're making. You're doing like, I've seen some of like the short form stuff that you're making just about travel, just certain ideas.
Yeah.
Do you see, so we were talking about like that kind of content creation strategy and having pillars. Do you have pillars of where you see your own stuff going? Like, is it a podcast? Is it a video series, a vlog, travel?
So I think it'll be heavily vlog influenced. Sort of like the short form things that I think we're talking about the same thing is, I would love to do longer versions of those. Those were fun because I was giving myself the constraint of like all those videos where like I wake up in the morning, I write out the script, I go into the office, I record it, and then I figure the video out. Like they're all made within like 12 hours. Wow. Like just start it, and like just because I was like it was gonna be like my Sunday project of like just to like make something for the day. And those were the things that I think hit the most. Like I get a lot of people that are resonating with it, so I want to make more of those. I'm thinking about doing a podcast too about sort of like travel creators and the next wave of creators like YouTubers. I think just, kids' abilities to like buy a camera and start recording their lives and like seeing the people who are like breaking through is just absolutely bonkers.
These kids are dope, man. Like I'll see some of these kids like in high school and I'm like, because then when I'm comparing them to my work now. I'm not comparing them to my work in high school. My work in high school is garbage.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, man, these kids, they learn so quickly. They just have all the tools and resources at their hands. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. We gotta keep making shit.
I know. You gotta like stay on your toes.
yeah. Which is a good thing, right? It's
absolutely.
Like,
I mean, yeah, dude. Like, I love it. Like, I love that there's like 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that are just making shit that I think blows my stuff out of the water.
Yeah.
You know? I'm like, good. Like, I gotta go.
Yeah. No, sometimes I'm inspired by both. I think you can get inspiration anywhere, but like when I see other people like younger than me that are doing amazing shit, I'm like, yeah, I gotta kick it into high gear. I need to keep going.
Yeah.
But then also when I see people that have a big platform, big audience, and they're putting out crap or they're putting out something that I'm like, oh man, I could do that way better. Yeah. That inspires me too. Cause I'm like, oh, okay. So it's not necessarily just about quality. It's about, longevity, and can 100%. You keep going? Like, can you keep making shit over a long period of time?
Yeah.
Like when you're creating your own shit and you're thinking about potentially building this up and making it sustainable where you can make some money off of it.
Yeah.
Do you have ideas of how you would monetize your own content?
I'm going back and forth with it. Definitely, I think like YouTube's a great way to start making stuff right away, but obviously you need to have like a good following. Probably, I mean, it's tough to give this advice to someone who's like just starting, because I do have like a little bit of a following on like my Instagram and stuff like that. But doing like brand partnerships and sponsorships would be the fastest way to monetize from like where I am at this exact moment.
That's the thing that I find challenging. I mean, for me, it's more difficult because I put out a message of like, not anti-advertising, but like be really mindful about advertising and the marketing messages that you get thrown at you. So that's something that I've been thinking more and more about. It's like, would I do any advertising on the podcast? And I think obviously probably should be at a certain level. I don't think it would be worth it. If you're not going to be making enough money to survive off of, you're probably not at a point where it'd be worth it to even start, doing advertising or posting these sponsorships. Yeah. But then it's like, sometimes people can overdo it with the sponsorships, and it's like, I don't know, like there's a balance there, right? Where you don't want to be like overexposed, where you're like literally promoting a product every single day on Instagram or even every week. I think you have to be like thoughtful about how
I mean, that's what I was going to say is like, again, it's all comes down to authenticity, right? And it's like selling things that actually like interact with your world and things you're going to use every day,
right? Like that you're talking about the travel bag that you use, like that's easy, right? It's something you use, you get value out of every day. You'd be talking about it anyway, so you might as well make some money to let people know about it.
I mean, that's my biggest thing, especially when you're like earlier in the game, like quote unquote, like I don't want to sell out and be like, also toothpaste is dope, like, you know what I mean? Right now I'm trying to like only push things that actually like everyday affect how I'm living.
Right. I think that's important too. Have you started to do that?
There's a little bit. Yeah.
It's
starting to like slowly come in.
How have you found that? Do they come to you or do you go to them?
They're coming to me for the most part. Yeah.
And
a lot of it's like early stage startups or something that just need eyeballs. And so they're like sending me stuff to promote, and I'm very, very picky with it though.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's not quite an advertisement as much as it's like they're giving you free product. Is that right? Or do they?
It's more so that right now. Again, like it was like I said earlier, I'm scared to take money right now because I'm too busy. Like I'm scared to like say cool, we're gonna pay you $1,000 to make a video, and I'm like, cool, but like I have like real life happening too, of like bigger commitments. So right now it's a lot more like, sure, I'm taking a lot of like free stuff that's being sent over, and like I'm picking and choosing what I want to interact like. And everything that gets sent to me, it's funny, like the travel bag was sent to me and I used it for 6 months before I said a word about it. And then it was like, oh, like I'm gonna go do this trip, and then we ended up saying like, oh, let's do it together, and that's how the Costa Rica thing happened.
Oh, cool. Is that when you met them for the first time? That's pretty neat.
We had met like briefly, and we had like done some phone calls and stuff, and then the guy who owns the company was like, fuck it, like I'm just gonna come with you, and now we're like best friends. It's the best.
I feel like if I ever do that, it would definitely be it's something you have to actually trial and run and use. And like there's definitely, that's the thing, it's so challenging, like to be at a stance where you're like, I will not put ads on my podcast, or I'm not going to use any kind of advertisements. Like obviously there's other ways to get creative, to create courses, digital products, books, whatever it is. But at the same time, I'm like, if there are digital products that I use, and I use a list of them that I pay for that are amazing and they help me with my business and prioritize and organize my life, it's like, what is so wrong about promoting them and getting some money for it?
I
don't know. It's the world we live in. I'm battling this now. It's funny because there's probably podcasts that I've recorded that I'm like, I don't think I've ever actually said like, I will never do advertising.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the more I get into it and the more work I put into it, and the fact that this is a full-time job of creating content, you're like, there's got to be some ways to make that work.
Yeah.
Make these sponsorships work.
I think it's funny too, because like as creatives, like money tends to, I mean, at least for myself, like money's definitely a back burner thing. Like I'm like, I just want to like create stuff.
Yeah.
And so anytime money gets involved, I like kind of like get nervous and freak out. And I'm like, how do I like ask for money in terms of things that I would have made regardless? You know, like I just want to make stuff, you know? And so like, that's always tough. Like I'm getting ready to put out my first like Lightroom, like Photoshop action pack. And I'm like nervous about it. You know, I'm like,
right.
Fuck, like I don't like, I would just give these away for free.
Yeah.
You know, and so to be like, no, like they're worth this amount, like it's tough.
It is tough, and I think it's something that you've got to embrace, and that's the only way to continue to make it as a creative. I mean, as a freelancer, that's the thing that I saw is like a lot of people early on, they were incredibly talented filmmakers, photographers, designers, but then they just gave up because they couldn't turn it into a business. They couldn't make money off of it. Yeah. And like money, you got to get paid to make your art. And I think that we should be very thoughtful about it, because like it just gets annoying and you can certainly hurt your integrity if you are selling shit constantly and you're always asking for something from your audience. You're always asking them to go somewhere, click something, do something, instead of just saying, here's something. You know what I mean? Here's a piece of content that you might like.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those like funny things. Gary said the line one time where someone asked him about like, I'm a starving artist. And he's like, yeah, like starving artists are starving artists because they think of themselves as artists, you know? But if you flip it and you're like, I'm a businessman and I sell art, everything changes.
It's all about a perspective of how you look at the world.
Yeah, it's just how you're approaching creativity, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like you still have to pay rent.
Yeah,
you know.
This is back to this. This is a real world, man. We got to make shit happen, and we gotta eat.
Yeah.
We don't want those peanut butter and sandwiches every day.
Exactly.
For the rest of our life.
It's terrible. I literally like haven't had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in like 2 years because it was just I burned out so hard from it.
Dude, that was very early on for me. Dollar menu was everything. Like Wendy's dollar menu wouldn't be not Wendy's, McDonald's, but like just any of those like cheap fast food places. It's just like, but it's also hard. I would tell people if you can do rice and beans, there's other ways to eat a little bit healthier.
I mean, when you have like the parachute of youth, it's a little bit more okay, but I mean like your health will go to shit quick.
True. I've noticed that, man. As you get older, you're like, my body doesn't respond in the same ways that it used to. All right, cool. Let's do quick questions and then we'll finish this podcast up. What book, if you read much, has had the biggest impact on your life?
The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Ryan Holiday, right? He's a Canadian, is that right? Or he's
where is he from?
He's written a few books.
Yeah. So he's big on like Stoic philosophy. Honestly, so I have two: The Process tattoo and then Memento Mori, which I got in Costa Rica on that trip. Are both like very like Stoic philosophy thinkings that the process specifically came from The Obstacle is the Way. And The Obstacle is the Way is a big one because it's like just accepting things that jump in your way of like getting to your goal and how to turn them into positives. So it's funny, walking out of the office the day that I was told I didn't have a job, I crushed through The Obstacle is the Way in like 12 hours and like it completely changed the way I thought about it. I think that book is why I emailed Gary and said, yo, let's like meet.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I owe that book a lot.
Shit, dude.
Yeah.
You know what's the cool thing just about doing podcasts and this kind of content is that like you get to a point where then you could reach out to Ryan Holiday and be like, hey, what's up, man? I want to do this, and that. And that's one of like the greatest.
That's, it's funny you say that because so recently, actually probably not recently, probably about a year ago, I was like walking through the office. It was like a Saturday afternoon and I saw a copy of it on someone's desk. And so I picked it up and like took a picture of it and like gave a little bit of the story behind that and the tattoo. And Ryan reached out to me. Yeah.
Wow.
And so we ended up like meeting up in New York and like, talked for a couple hours. Yeah, it was great.
Oh, that's so cool, man.
Yeah.
I love that, dude. When you look at your work and what you do, what do you think drives you? Well, like what drives you to work those 6 months day and night, to put in work on your own stuff on the weekend? Why do you keep making shit?
That's a good question. Because I don't know. Like it's super like it's an internal thing. I'm really bad at sitting still. Like I'm not good at like relaxing. And I think that when you find something that you love and you're good at and it like is a way to make money, you just have to get so like laser focused. And I just feel like I won the lottery, honestly. Like the fact that like I'm 24 and like every day feels like just fun. And it's like, that's my life. It's like, why would I slow down for anything?
When are you happiest?
When am I happiest? When I'm out like creating just for myself, like just doing trips that are like no real goal, no expectation of like what's going to come out of it. Just like, let's put myself out of my comfort zone in a new place and just see what happens.
A couple more questions here. Yeah. Where do you go when you're feeling doubt?
Super in my head. I will literally put on music and walk through the city for just hours, and I'll just like...
Really? So you do that quite a bit?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of my biggest things. So walking through New York at night, like listening to just like instrumental beats is like my happy place of like whenever like shit's not clicking right in my head, and I'll literally just go out and just talk to myself and just like for like hours. Like I'll like go walk through the city for like overnight.
Wow.
And just like figure it out.
So instrumental hip hop?
Yeah.
You lay down some bars in your head too?
Yeah, every now and then. I mean, I'm like talking myself through it, and I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I still owe my audience a freestyle rap because I had
now do it.
Yeah, no, I do it right now because I had Elliot Ashby on the podcast, and like he dabbles with rap, and he's a filmmaker at Hot 97 in New York, and he spit like. Just, it was amazing. It was like on the post show. He just dropped these bars. I was like, "Damn, that's good." I thought I could actually bring something, but I'm like, "This is embarrassing. I'm not going to do it."
Maybe eventually. Is that what you listen to? Are you big like a hip hop person?
Yeah, I love hip hop. I mean, I'm not like a hip hop head where I know like everything inside and out, but it's like definitely hip hop has been like the primary genre of music that I listen to, and then every once in a while I'll kind of shy away from it. But that's been cool. Actually, I had Asher Roth on the podcast.
Love Asher.
Yeah, Asher was the man, dude. He because I actually connected with him early on in Philly, and I made some videos with him, and he just happened to be through LA, and just kind of had him on. But I'm like, dude, that's what I want more of. If I could just get more rappers on the podcast, I'm like, it's just so cool to be able to meet people that like you respect and appreciate their work, and you're interested in what they do, and to be able to just kind of just a chat. I mean, just having a conversation with you, it's like that's what it's all about. It's like honestly, like if this podcast doesn't grow or become a thing, that alone is an enjoyable part of the process. Just to get
and it allows you to build up that network, right? Like even if like the podcast doesn't do what you want it to do, you still have those connections. So like fuck it.
100 episodes, you met 100 people, and you know who knows where those things will lead to, and like I guarantee there's probably going to be a big project that stems from just a podcast interview.
100%.
What's the simplest advice that's the most important to follow?
There's this Banksy quote. There's nothing more common in the world than unsuccessful people with talent. So leave the house before you find something worth staying for. I usually just like hold on to the back half of it. But I think that you can easily get complacent in the world and like just go with like the safe route and potentially miss out on like what your real calling is. So that's the thing that floats around in my head the most.
I love that, man. I think we should just end the podcast on that.
All right, yeah.
Cool. So if people want to connect with you online, where should we send them?
Instagram's definitely the best place right now, which is at Babin, Babin. Tyler Babin on YouTube, tylerbabin.com. One of those. I check them all pretty often. So
cool, brother. Thanks for making this work.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. All right, that's it for this week's podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. To support the show, you can leave a review on iTunes. It only takes 15 seconds, and it would just mean the world to me. Or you can share your favorite podcast episode with a friend. It's probably going to be this one. This one was pretty good, right? If you liked it, let a friend know where they can listen to it. And where is that? GroundUpShow.com. Simple as that. See you next week.